The Lord my portion, or Daily Need Divinely Supplied, by Octavius Winslow, 1870. Preface. The Lord's people but imperfectly realize their boundless wealth. They resemble an heir to whom a vast estate has been bequeathed, but who yet remains ignorant of the rich and extensive mines which underlie its surface, filling every acre with veins of the richest ore until some incidental upturned sod brings to light the precious deposit. God has given us His Word, a field of wealth incalculable, His Son, in whom are hid all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge, the covenant of grace, ordered in all things and sure, and Himself, our infinite, all-sufficient, all-satisfying, and inalienable portion. Well may the Apostle, summing up the inventory of our possessions, exclaim, as if no measurement or number could compass and compute their extent, "All things are yours." To enable the pious reader to estimate in some experimental measure his vast opulence is the design of this little work. The writer has endeavored to concentrate all the believer's wealth where, in truth, God has deposited it, in Jesus, deeply solemnly convinced that it is the lack of more simple views of Christ and a more direct application to His mediatorial sufficiency, dealing with the Father more immediately through the Son, in whom it pleased Him that all the fullness should dwell, which is the cause of so much soul leanness, prostration of spiritual power, and languor of love in many of the saints. The points of light in which God and Christ may be regarded as the believer's portion were many and inviting. The writer trusts his pages will afford at least some faint reflection of the unsearchable riches of Christ, to which the weakest, the obscurest, Christ-believing, Christ-loving soul may prefer a personal claim, and say, "All is mine, for I am Christ's, and Christ is God's." The Lord, my portion. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in Him. Lamentations 3:24. It is our great privilege, beloved, that we live in a portionless world. This is both our distinctive badge and our Christian charter. When God parceled out the land of Canaan among the tribes of Israel, He made an exception in the tribe of Levi, to whom He said, "You shall have no inheritance in the land, neither shall you have any part among them," assigning as His reason, "I am your share and your inheritance." The gospel teaching of this is obvious and significant. As the Lord's true priesthood, this world is not our portion, nor earth our rest. It may have required some painful discipline and no small measure of faith on the part of the devout Levite as he gazed upon the fertile meadows, the watered plains, and the vine-clad hills of the promised land before he was made willing to relinquish it all for Him who is invisible. And it needs no little teaching and discipline of our God, and no little faith on our part, before we are led to give up the world, the creature, self, and all, for Christ, satisfied to have the Lord alone as our portion, and heaven only as our inheritance. But the Lord will not put His people off with anything unworthy of Him to give, or them to accept. He has set them apart for Himself, and Himself apart for them. All believers are the Lord's clergy, and as they are His portion, so He is theirs. Leighton. The Lord's portion is His people. Israel is the lot of His inheritance. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. His love to us was so great that when He could give no greater proof of that love, He gave Himself. Nothing more could have expressed the yearnings of His heart. Nothing less could have satisfied the desires of ours. And oh, what a portion is God! All that he is and all that he has is ours. Every attribute of his being is over us. Every perfection of his nature encircles us. Every pulse of his heart beats for us. Every glance of his eye smiles upon us. We dwell in God, and God dwells in us. It is not the world which is our portion, but he who made, upholds, and governs the world. It is not the creature who is our portion, but the Lord of angels and the Creator of men. Infinite portion, illimitable power, immeasurable grace, boundless love, all-satisfying good, all is ours. And what a portion, O my soul, is Christ, a divine Christ, a redeeming Christ, a full Christ, a sympathizing, ever-present, ever-precious, ever-loving Christ. Lord, I bless you for the discipline that brought me to realize what a divine, all-satisfying portion I have in yourself. You took me from an earthly portion only to enrich me with a heavenly one. You removed from me the human prop upon which I too fondly and idolatrously leaned, that I might learn what Christ was as my soul's all-sufficient, all-satisfying, and everlasting portion. I can now admire the wisdom and adore the love that blasted my gourds and emptied me from vessel to vessel, that rising superior to the broken staff, the drooping flower, and the failing spring of creature good, I might claim my portion as a true spiritual Levite in yourself alone. Believer in Jesus, make the most of your portion. It is all sufficient for all your need. God has, perhaps, made you poor in this world, that you might be rich in faith and an heir of that kingdom of glory, the New Jerusalem he has prepared for you, whose foundations are precious stones, whose walls are jasper, whose gates are pearls, whose streets are pure gold, and through which softly flows the river of the water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and the Lamb. In the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, is the tree of life, bearing 12 manner of fruit, and yielding her fruit every month. All this awaits you. Hope in the Lord. Hope in adversity. Hope in trial. Hope against hope. For God in Christ is your present and eternal portion. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. The Lord, my husband. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. For your Maker is your husband. The Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. Isaiah 54, verse 5. How many, appropriate to our circumstances and endearing to our hearts, are the titles and relations of God. Is there one more sacred or precious to the Christian widow than this? Your Maker is your husband. The Lord brings us into a gracious and experimental acquaintance with himself by the circumstances in which he places us. Just as we learn certain lessons in certain schools, so we learn the relationships which the Lord sustains to us in the positions in life to which those divine relations are the most appropriate. Thus, he may have written you a widow indeed, that he might stand to you in a new and more endeared relation, even as you stand to him in a new and more dependent character, the relation of a husband, the character of a widow. As such, he is your portion. Your bereavement is so crushing, your grief is so profound, your desolation so vast, your loss so irreparable. The pen shrinks from even the attempt to describe it. The strong and beautiful staff is broken. The earthly counselor is perished. The tongue is mute that blessed you, the bosom cold that pillowed you, the eye dim that smiled upon you, and the whole landscape of life is draped in wintry coldness and gloom. But the Lord is your portion, for your Maker is your husband, the Lord Almighty is his name. Divorced by death from an earthly husband, you are united more especially and closely to a divine and heavenly husband, even to God in Christ, who stands now in a new and more endeared relation to you, as you have now a new and more sacred claim upon him. The widow is an object of his especial regard. No being has he more closely fenced, none for whom he has discovered more tender care. Listen to some of his touching injunctions respecting you. You shall not afflict the widow. Plead for the widow. He will establish the border of the widow. He relieves the fatherless and the widow. Such is the divine portion under whose sheltering wing you have now come to rest. Your Maker is your husband. All, and infinitely more than the fondest, most powerful, and faithful husband ever was, the Lord is to you. Let him, as none other can, fill the vacant place. He can make even your solitary and desolate heart sing for joy. Espouse Christ afresh. Renew your first love to him, the love of your earliest union. Trace nothing but love in the removal of a human object so dear, and know that love, divine, tender, unchangeable love, will guard, guide, and comfort you until wedded hearts, sundered by death, shall meet to renew a fellowship of love in the glorified presence of Jesus, never to be sundered more. Blessed Jesus, heavenly husband, let me now be united only and forever to you. Give me your Spirit to seal the sacred union. Enable me, as enjoined in the Word, to trust in God, and to continue in supplication and prayer night and day, to lodge strangers, to wash the saints' feet, to relieve the afflicted, and diligently to follow every good work. 1 Timothy 5:5 and 10. And thus, striving by your grace to glorify you in the solemn character of a God-fearing, God-trusting widow, enable me to rejoice in you as my portion, my husband, believing that you will shield me in temptation, supply me in need, comfort me in sorrow, be with me in death, and give me a place at the marriage supper of the Lamb. In addition to the loneliness of widowhood, there may be the heavy charge and anxious responsibility of the parent. Your children are half orphans, fatherless. Be it so. You have now a double claim on God's care and provision, and that claim, offered in the prayer of faith, he will acknowledge. His promise is, and on that promise you must rely, leave your fatherless children, I will preserve them alive, and let your widows Trust in me.